Hey, howdy, hey! So I'm doing something new and I'm doing a book review. Yay! Well, I graduated and I finally kind of have time to read for pleasure, which isn't something you really do while you're in school. So I got to read a book that I saw someone talk about on TikTok and thought was very intriguing, and now I'm here to tell you about it. So I just finished Lost Boy, The True Story of Captain Hook by Christina Henry. She also has written books about Alice in Wonderland and the Queen of Hearts and all of that. But I'm much more of a Peter Pan person than an Alice in Wonderland person. Your back of your book is gonna say, from the national best-selling author of Alice comes a familiar story with a dark hook, a tale about Peter Pan and the friend who became his nemesis, a nemesis who may not be the black-hearted villain Peter says he is. There is one version of my story that everyone knows, and then there is the truth. This is how it happened, how I went from being Peter Pan's first and favorite lost boy to his greatest enemy. Peter brought me to his island because there were no rules and no grown-ups to make us mind. He brought boys from the other place to join in the fun, but Peter's idea of fun is sharper than a pirate's sword, because it's never been all fun and games on the island. Our neighbors are pirates and monsters. Our toys are knife and stick and rock, the kinds of playthings that bite. Peter promised we would all be young and happy forever. Peter lies. So of course that sounded very, very intriguing for me. When I watched Once Upon a Time on ABC, my favorite storyline and character of the entire show was Captain Hook and the story of Captain Hook. And that's just, I'm a big villain person, and I really like redeemed villains and the backstories of villains and how to become a villain, all of these things. It's just more psychologically intriguing for me. So of course I had to give this a try for one of my first books for pleasure that I've read in many years. So first impressions, it took me a long time, like more than halfway into the book, for me to realize whether or not I actually liked the book, which is not always the best sign. However, I was having more problems with the tone of the novel than I think anything else. It's written very differently from what I normally read, and so it was definitely a bigger step away out of my, out of the box for me than I thought it was going to be. I will say when I ended the novel, I did come to the conclusion that I liked the story, I really liked the plot, and I enjoyed the way that the plot falls throughout the novel, even though I may not have thoroughly enjoyed the way that the plot was delivered through the writing and through the mannerisms of speech and the patterns and the grammar and all of that. So ultimately I did like the novel, but more because of the story that I was receiving than the actual writing of the novel. So some weird things that I didn't know about and we'll talk about now that are spoiler free still. The book is divided into several parts, kind of like acts. It's 4 parts. It doesn't particularly change the chronology of the story or the way that the story is delivered. I think if you took the pages that say part 1, part 2, it wouldn't change the book at all. So I found that was kind of a weird choice that was made, especially because they weren't evenly done, but it definitely, if you're breaking it down, it's kind of is a 4-part story structure, and she just was very clearly separating the acts of the story, even though some are much longer than others. Some are very small. So I think that's really just was a personal writing preference that is not necessary, but a little helpful if you're navigating the book. Something else that's not spoiler free is this book is very boyish. As someone who grew up surrounded by mostly females, by other girls, and lived a very female driven and filled life, the attitudes and actions of the characters were really hard for me to relate to for a very large portion of the book. And that's also another reason that I was having problems, having trouble deciphering if I was actually enjoying it. Because I didn't feel like I could relate to the way that I couldn't relate to the supporting characters of the novel because they seemed so driven by impulse. Like there were there were several times, especially acts of violence that did not seem to have any driving force behind it, and that was a little weird to me. I felt like, why is this happening? I don't understand why this is happening. This seems very random and very violent and very unnecessary. And as I was getting more into the book, I realized it wasn't the violence itself that was bothering me. It was the fact that some of these acts of violence didn't seem to have any inciting incidents. They would just happen out of nowhere. And I was discussing this with my family, and it was pointed out to me that really just showed that I had not really grown up with other boys, because boys do just act very randomly and violently. And so if you're unfamiliar with the way that like young boys act, it can be a little off-putting because it seems just very unnecessary. So be warned that is something that happens. And I ultimately got over it, but it was definitely really off-putting for me for a long time, of like a large portion of the book. Something else that I was kind of struggling with was that the narrator, the character who becomes Captain Hook, was a very mature narrator, a very caring narrator, and I would find myself that's wonderful. It was much more relatable to me as a narrator because it was more of on a maturity level that I could relate to. However, it would then hit me that the narrator is in the body of an 11-year-old boy and he's surrounded by lost boys that are 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, sometimes younger, sometimes much younger, and it was very off-putting to me to be experiencing what happens in this novel and to know that it is occurring to these very, very young children. So overall, bad things you should be aware of is that it's very violent. The tone is a little abrupt and strange, and it's lost boys. They're very, very young children that the story is happening to. And when I say it's a very violent story, it is graphically violent, which I was not expecting. So be aware that it is graphically violent. Some things that I did like, though, was the characters. I really liked the characters. I liked that it's very different than what you normally see, especially with Peter. The way Peter is written and the things that you find out about Peter, it's very, very different from your usual Peter Pan story. And I really liked that it was something that I was so familiar with, and I was receiving it in a completely new way. Something else is that this is still in the characters. I really liked Jamie. I think that that is a wonderful character, and the way that the story unfolds to lead you to where we know Captain Hook and how and why he's Captain Hook is wonderful. And it made the entire book for me. As I've just said, I struggled with a lot of different aspects of the book, but Jamie kept me tied in. I didn't want to put it down sometimes because I just wanted to know what happens to Jamie. So it has a very, very good character that you are getting the first person perspective from, and the story that you are receiving. He's absolutely wonderful. Some other things are that I like that there was a lot of world building about the island, and it was new things. It was not, I mean, it's like, you know that there's the Mermaid Lagoon, but you don't really see that much of Mermaid Lagoon. You hear about it a couple of times. You're hearing more about these other creatures that are on the island, these other things. You don't see much, if any, of the fairies. It's all of these things that you're familiar with from the lore is downplayed because you know that you're familiar with it. And so it builds all of this outside world building, this new world building for the island. And so that was really cool because you're getting new stuff. You're getting completely new things for a story that you already know. When I try and sit and think about the things that I really, really liked, it's really hard for me to put into a list exactly why I'm coming out of this having enjoyed the book. You know, as you've probably gathered, there was a lot that I didn't really care for or struggled with or just was meh or confused by. But I've come out of this thinking I really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed it. I liked it. I would probably read it again. But I can't exactly tell you why, other than it gripped me and it told me a story that I genuinely liked, even if all of these other aspects of the novel weren't my favorite. The story, which is the most important part, is really good.
Hello, this is your dad in post. I just wanted to add to this point I was making that the plot isn't really the most important part of the story. Sometimes the characters are, and the characters made this story for me. I think the characters were absolutely wonder in conjunction with a very wonderful plot.
So I ultimately would give this book a 4 out of 5 stars because and it only loses the star genuinely because there were so many things that I had issues with. But I'm saying this, I loved the book. I really liked the story. I really liked reading it. I had a good time reading it. And I would read it again. So it's going to be a 4 out of 5 for me. Have you read this book? Are you going to read this book? If so, leave a comment, leave a like. Let me know if this review helped you. If you disagree with anything, if you agree with anything, and what your thoughts are on the novel, both first impression and after chewing on it for a while, because I finished this over a week ago and I've been chewing on it, and the longer it's been from finishing it, the more I realized that I enjoyed the novel. So what are your thoughts? What do you think about it? And do you want to see more book impressions from me? I'm trying to read more, so I can certainly deliver some. Let me know. Until next time, I will see you later. Go read some books. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to see me do, both book-wise and other. And I'll see you next time. Bye!